Earlier today, I went on to Curator and have been picking up with some of the chats that you've been having there, and I've been beginning to interact with you as well. So one of the things I wanted to start by saying, even before I'm doing any sharing or anything like that, is where you are using Curator, where you have got any questions I simply don't get time to address in the actual sessions themselves, but I do hope that none of you are feeling dismissed if you pop something in chat and I miss it. Absolutely. Please feel free to go into Curator, put it there. I'm now kind of making this my habit of going and checking and engaging with anything, any of you there, to help you with any of that thinking. So look out for that. That would be great. So let me start by sharing screen at this stage. Okay, there we are. Again, somebody give me a thumbs up. Can you see developing management skills session 5? Fabulous. Thank you. Our system is working. I'll put the chat room back up. There it is. And let me go for it. So welcome back. You can see the progress that we're making. We've gone through that case study into the role of the manager today, looked into the wider context. And then yesterday we spent some time unpicking and unpacking some of those effective management skills. We're now going to start to bolt the whole thing back together again by looking at distinct areas, working with individuals, as people. Then later today, we're looking at building the team as the team. Before then, on our final day of working together, we'll look at, you know, the fact that there are still challenges out there, challenging situations, challenging people, a session around that, and then we'll draw the whole thing together. There's our focus for today. Our general headings for today, therefore, are about building trust, setting objectives, supervision and one-to-ones, delegation and coaching. And I hope you immediately see that connect with the notion of working with people, and perhaps more so, as I've described it, working with individuals rather than entire teams, because I think, you know, we have those conversations with people, don't we, about their objectives. We sit down in one-to-ones. We do delegate to whole teams, but thinking of this through in terms of delegating to an individual and coaching individuals. Team coaching is also possible, but focus our minds on coaching the individual. So we are going to look at a particular concept of trust, comparing competence and benevolence in that. We'll do some practice around setting clear, measurable objectives, and you had an exercise in your workbooks around that. If you've got that to hand, it might be useful because we're going to be running a poll on that. I will also be talking with you there around an alternative to objectives as objectives and actually focusing more on outcomes. And I think that can be a very useful way of thinking of it. We'll spend some time looking at supervision sessions and getting you to develop a template agenda, an exercise around good practice in delegation, and then depending on our time, looking at some models around coaching and their applications. So look at this picture, these two dancers who I mean, my reading of dancers, I'm not a dancer, I do enjoy sport, I do enjoy physical activity. If you hadn't guessed by my background, I love skiing. So, you know, I love having to learn a skill. I love the thrill of being active and speed and having to have a good solid core to get me down that mountain safely. And I hope with the image we're looking at here, you've got this sense of two people who are dancers and are therefore skilled. This is not learned overnight to become a dancer. It may be that I have some dancers in the room as well and would back me up in this. And I think also to be a truly good dancer, you need to have an absolutely solid set of core muscles, because they weight bear, they give balance. So all of that language and analogy. And look what's happening here between the two people. There surely has to be trust, not only from the person who is now lying on the back of the dancer beneath, but actually the dancer beneath also has to have trust in the other party as well, because we've got that sense of movement around them, and that movement can so quickly tip them off balance. So my analogy is straight off for us. So let me start to share with you some of the notions behind this. You've got a link there to a PDF book that you might want to download, and it was written by Peter Scholtes, and it's called the Leadership Handbook. And in it, at quite an early stage in his work, he begins to look at the notion of trust and respect and how essential this is to the relationship between a manager leader and that person's staff group, both as a group and as individuals. And he identifies these two elements, that the manager has to be seen to have aptitude, substitute the word competence for that, I think it works just as well. And that when staff members are therefore observing the manager, they have to know that the manager themselves is competent, has aptitude. For me, that doesn't necessarily mean to say that a manager actually has to have all the skills and competence areas that staff member do, but certainly an understanding of. But in his or her own right, a manager needs to be seen to have aptitude, so being competent and capable. When staff members look at and observe their own managers, they need to have a sense of benevolence. So this is the extent to which I believe as a staff member that you care about me as my manager and will continue to back me up. And then, of course, if we add each of these together, these different, the two sets of axes, Peter Scholtes offers us descriptions for each. So he suggests that if I know that my manager is competent, they may well have different competences than I do, but they are competent, capable, they have aptitude, and they believe in me, I believe in them, then trust begins to develop between us. But let's isolate each of those axes and reduce one of them. So if I think of my manager that, well, they're perfectly competent, perfectly capable, and therefore I do respect them, but do I actually believe they will back me up? Oh, not necessarily, because the last time we were discussing X, whatever X is, the next thing I knew was that the manager appeared to take our conversation and be sharing that everywhere else as if it were his or her own idea. So do I believe that they're backing me up, respecting me? No, not really, actually. So I can respect their aptitude, but not necessarily their benevolence. Let's flip it the other way. It is possible for a staff member to look at their manager and say, the manager is benevolent, they seem to back me up, they seem to show genuine concern about me as an individual, but actually I think my competence, my skills far outweigh theirs, and even though I would reasonably expect theirs also maybe to be operating in a slightly different area, I just see an absence of that in them. So I can feel affection towards them in that sense, but I don't actually respect their ability to do the job. And the suggestion is that to have a really solid relationship, those two things need to be in a degree of balance. Clearly, if they are absent, then distrust starts to arise, and I will predict a breakdown in relationship. Now, I wanted to share this with you as a model right now, because it may well become relevant when we are meeting some fictional characters over a sessions tomorrow, that you will want to have this model in your mind and be referring back to it and thinking about the degree to which the individual shows aptitude and the degree to which they are showing benevolence. So I'm wondering if right now into the chat box you would like to be offering any of your thoughts regarding how we can nurture trust in our between ourselves and our staff members, what is it that you can do in a practical sense in order to generate that? So please fire away with any thoughts. I've got the chat box open, so please fire away with any thoughts. Lovely, super. Seeing a few things coming up. Consistency. I think it takes time to earn it. Very good. It takes time to earn it, can be broken in pretty much an instant. Transparency seems to be a very common theme that's coming up. Empathy, transparency around decision making, I'm seeing. Create an environment where questions and admission of needing help is a success factor. Beautiful. And actually, I think also in this picture, it can be okay. Think about Jane again from the case study. If Jane had actually gone back out to her team and said, I've been presented with this challenge, I have some ideas, but I don't absolutely have it nailed down, she may well have engaged a better relationship with her team. So that would have been a good example of that, I think. So actually the manager showing a degree of humility and vulnerability, actually. So transparency helps build trust. Follow through, lovely, follow through. It's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. I don't know from a skill point of view, I don't know from an organizational decision-making point of view, but I will certainly go away and find out, and then making sure you come back, follow through in short order in a timely fashion with people. Wonderful. So some fantastic examples there around how you can begin to nurture that sense of mutual trust and respect. I think it also goes, therefore, to the idea of you as managers having trust and respect for your own staff members as well. So wanting to get them to be eager and hungry learners, enabling them to show their vulnerabilities about areas they don't know or are unsure of. Remember the Johari window, getting people to open up. I'm nervous about that, I've not done it before, so that you're able to say, recognize that, we can put some things in place, I can spend some time with you, taking you through it, let's get you spending some time with one of the other internal experts, so you build that confidence and you can see that trust blossoming and growing. You might like to check out the website if you're not already familiar with it. Great Place to Work. If you Google that, it'll come up. I've got a feeling it might already be accessible to you through the workbook, and certainly the some of the slides that we've got out there for you on Curator as well from each of these sessions. In the Great Place to Work, it references a survey of what were the attributes that constituted a great place to work. When I looked at this list, it was almost very like some of the lists we created in our earlier sessions around the competencies of great leaders and great managers. And I just nudge you in that direction now, because if you actually take a look at that Great Place to Work and some of the findings, it might enable you again to add some of those words and phrases to your how good am I at X, Y, and Z list, therefore to kind of keep working on and developing that. So thank you all for that. I hope that's given you a few thoughts even at this stage. Oh, I'm missing lots of new messages I can see, so lovely. Honesty and accountability, I'm just scrolling back through them. I won't pick them all up right now, but I'm just scrolling through to make sure I've not missed anything that in any way contradicts or you want to engage with me more. Managers' solid experience, backing staff up, amplify their work, yeah. Active listening, so a reference to some of what we did yesterday. Always give credit where credit is due. Wonderful. So in fact, the best thing that can ever be said to a manager is your team is doing a great job. Because if your team is doing a great job, it is very probably testimony to the nature of the relationship that you have with them and the way you enable them to develop and grow and contribute to the organisation. So remember that phrase if you're not familiar with it. The best thing that can ever be said to a manager is your team is doing a great job. So thank you for that. Let me look then. Sorry, I'm scrolling rather than flicking forward, so bear with me. So there you go, there again. Okay, therefore everything that you've said, I love this dog doing the high five. It's kind of everything that you've said will help to build that rapport. If you add on then what we were doing yesterday around listening, communication, feedback. So let's start to take a look at your role in helping people to see the big picture. Do you remember the jigsaw puzzle from yesterday or the day before? I referenced that then. So how does that work in practice? Well, any organisation will have a business planning cycle. I'd like you to engage in your own heads right now with what your business planning cycle is. Maybe you are into long-term 5- and 10-year plans. You probably at the highest organisational level have and publish internally to some extent the business plan for a year, 2 years ahead. And your role, remember your role as a translator, your role in this is to begin to interpret and explain some of those company goals and discuss those at a team and individual level, individual part and their part in achieving that. Where you have regular team meetings, and if you kind of like as 1 year is cycling to an end and a new year is about to start, I would always put into one of those agendas a session around what the business plan means for us in the coming year. That is a great start of a great conversation piece, so that people go away and start to think, how can I contribute to that? Because then you need to sit down with your own individual staff members. How can you contribute to that? Discuss then if they are fully equipped from a skills, behavioural, attitude point of view in order to help the organisation achieve those goals. That in turn should lead, that discussion should lead to agreeing some objectives. And I am confident that you will all be familiar with that notion of SMART. Perhaps not the ER bit on the end, I'll come to that in just a very little while, but setting objectives. And then you need to agree, so some acronyms here, a personal development plan. Your language in your organisations might be slightly different, but I hope that as I'm revealing this, you are recognising your own organisation performance management cycles and your language in this. So you agree a personal development plan. And if in terms of at one level an individual already has all of the skills needed to achieve the plan as it is, then nevertheless have an aspirational conversation with that person at that stage. Together, you need to monitor, and I want to emphasize that word together, because I think it's the job of both parties, the individual and the line manager, to be monitoring the individual's performance and development, but then together agreeing the type and nature of the support that that individual needs to achieve the goals as they are, and also the content of the personal development plan. That then means that come the close of the year, and perhaps peppered through, punctuated through the year with other formal requirements that you sit down, might be quarterly, might be monthly, that there is an overall performance review. And that performance review then is going to look back. I'm going to turn my head and look over my shoulder. So look back over the year that's now passed. But then guess what? Look where the arrow goes. The arrow goes straight into the following year. And I think I've got a whole set of arrows now that, demonstrate that cycle and take us around that picture. So into the chat box, how far does that as a set of imagery replicate to some extent your own organisational route through this? Can you see it there at play? What do you call any of those things as well? Okay, some good comments coming in. Right, stuck in the day-to-day in order to find it difficult to focus enough on setting goals. Right, okay. Remember look, you've referred to drama, Bridget, there in that. Thank you for sharing that in and with everyone. You're quite right though, by your observation. You know, that gets you stuck in the drama, doesn't it? I would truly encourage you to kind of hold that faith and actually stop the world and do that longer term planning, because that brings it back into the do it piece. Some people saying some room for improvement here in your team. So Tara, thank you for that. It is applicable to others. Yes, yes, it matters, though there's a small loop between monitoring review on the day-to-day activities. Wonderful. Right. Actually, I think what I've shared with you on the screen, it does describe, in essence, the kind of a fairly standard approach to performance management, because effectively that's what it is. It's the performance management cycle I'm talking about here. But also there's been quite a move, quite a lot of studies that are happening around avoiding it being set in the minds of manager and staff member that it only happens on a quarterly, 6 monthly or annual basis, and that actually it should be done on a regular basis. And so where I've got the comment from Gibson about, thank you, about monitoring and review and there being a link and a loop on the day-to-day activities, I love that, because that is replicating that thinking. And so I don't want what you see here to be an excuse for only doing it at these points. Yes, you should be doing so regularly. Lovely. So another comment, we could be doing better in terms of helping junior staff understand their role in the big picture. So take my idea of making sure you put into one of your team meetings, as you come to the end of an annual business planning cycle and into the next, you know, a 10-15 minute session with your team about, this is what the organization is planning. How do we see ourselves contributing to that? I will virtually guarantee it will improve the quality of the conversations that then finish. Super. Okay. Wonderful stuff. Thank you for this absolute plethora, barrage of useful stuff that's coming into the chat box right now. So, just to be clear, actually, you know, what we have on this previous slide, just to be clear, is that by doing that, it means that people are less likely to be running around like this poor soul, headless, yeah, not having a picture with nothing to aim for. And we can all, ourselves included, get busy doing the day job, but actually we end up being busy doing nothing because we're not necessarily seeing where that leads into the whole. So that's the purpose of all of that. So in that bottom right hand corner of the slide 2 back, we've got the notion of setting objectives. That's where I want to go now. And I think I've got Lucy waiting in the wings with a poll. I promised you a poll as we set off. If you want to have your workbooks to hand, you had an exercise in there where you had 8 different statements and you had to identify if you thought they were a job description, an objective, a standard, or none of those. Would you like to open that poll, Lucy, and we'll see where we go. Some answers now beginning to come in, so we'll keep watching. So we're beginning to get some clear front runners for some. And I've got 57% of you have voted. And that number is rising all the time. Some distinct front runners emerging, not a full house in every case. Might be just a couple more people who are to vote if you are there. Have I got anybody else wanting to vote? Are we done? 13, yeah, nearly there. Okay, if anyone else would like to vote, you've got just the last few seconds in which to do so. And we're not quite there, Lucy, but if you would like to close that polls at this stage, just in case someone is not able to do it or attend, and then we'll have a look at the results.
Sure, let me close it.
Lovely, thank you. We've got enough of a feel. Okay, are you all seeing now a summary of the results or not? No? Okay, if I go share results. Are you seeing it now? Yeah, brilliant. Right, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so let's take each of these and get a feel for it. So you can see that of the first one, the eliminate maintenance coding errors for existing computer programs. We had 77% was the front runner on objective, and then we've got 15% on standard, and then equal third in job description and none of the above. Could I have someone open their, unmute themselves, come in and let me know whichever one it was. I'm entirely open-minded. I'm not commenting one way or the other as to which it might be, why you voted the way you did, if you would just share that with us. Can I look around the room and see if there's a hand up to invite him? Anybody go for it for me? Thank you, Ode, I can see your hand, go for it.
Okay, for me, I can start with any of the options, right?
Yeah, yes, you can, I don't mind, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go for number 4. I think the fourth option, I stayed with none of the above because I don't think it's smart enough to be an objective.
Right.
For me, well, at the end of the year, yes, but I don't think it's attainable, but it's not measurable. Right.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's your argument why you went for none of the above. Thank you. And Pam, we did close it, so yours may well not have submitted, and it says it seems to have frozen. So my apologies, Pam, if you were blocked out of that. So I hope you can see the sharing results now and go with the numbers. Right, thank you, Pam.
See them now.
Okay, that's
and I agree with O'Day on 4. I don't think it was specific enough.
Wonderful. Right, thank you for that. So there you go. You see, you've got an advocate in that. So and yet on number 4, it was showing the one that was the header was 62%, with none of the above then coming in second at 23%. So would somebody else like to look at a different of those 4 questions before I reveal my comments on the whole poll? Choose another one. Anybody like to, Gibson, your hand, I just caught it there. Yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to do the easy one. So number 3, the telephones should be answered, etc. That's a pretty clear standard. I mean, it gives all of the detail that you need.
Okay, pretty clear standard.
Sets an activity. Yep.
It's an activity. Okay, right, lovely. Thank you. And let's have a look at somebody else. Choose either 1 or 2. Where do I look? Anybody prepared to come in for me?
Mara's hand is up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well done, Mara and Jerry. I can see now. Sorry, I couldn't find it early. So I'll go Mara and Jerry for a last one. So you take one and then Jerry will have to have whichever one is left, Mara.
Okay. I'll try number 1. So for that one, I picked objective because it seems like it's over a period of time and, you know, there's real specifics around it. So it's kind of a goal to be achieved, like an objective for this year.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Super, thank you. And I'm still holding back my general comments. Jerry, would you like to take number 2?
Yeah, number 2 looks to me like something from the job description, expected responsibilities. So I would say that's JD.
JD for that one. Super. Thank you all so much for doing that and coming in with your views on the back of that poll. So let me reveal all now, in the sense that the first of those, to eliminate maintenance coding errors, I do indeed see as an objective, because it does tend to conform. If you think about what was in your workbooks with the definitions of each of those, it does tend to conform to that notion of being specific. It's descriptive. You could see it being done. Is it measurable? It's immeasurable from a number of aspects, I think. Is it achievable, attainable? We don't actually know for certain, because we've not got the person here to discuss that. And that's something I would just mention to you. So that the same would therefore go for that realism. And is it time-based? Yes, it certainly is time-based. In fact, it's, again, time-based, you could argue, from 2 aspects. The entire thing needs to be done by the 1st of October, and within that it's got to take no more than 40 working hours. So it's got 2 axes of time built into that. So I would indeed go with the objective. I can see, and Tara, thank you very much for putting up into the chat, and I do see that it is to all. So some uncertainty, and you know, your uncertainty shared with us actually replicates the fact that across the 4 statements in the poll, there wasn't absolute agreement. So it will often generate discussion. So I'm taking us through these, and then we can pick up in Curator where any of you want to go back through this. And maybe something you would want to do is to actually have a go at drafting an objective for yourself or for a staff member, and then bring it to Curator, and maybe a number of us could kind of cluster around that objective to see if it is really smart enough or if it could be improved. So that would be an idea about how we could take this forward. Let's look at that second one there, the job description. That came up with 85%, yes, I can see properly, saying it's a job description. And yes, I would agree with that. It's perhaps a rather old-fashioned item from a job description these days, but it's kind of got that descriptive piece of an activity that needs to be done repeatedly. The third item, this one, the largest percentage was standard. Yes, I would agree with you, standard. So this is where it's a predetermined level of performance, and that's how a standard is defined, a predetermined level of performance. So that would apply to the whole department. It might not apply to everybody on day one, because if you had somebody come into an organization and into a new job role that they were new to, they might not be able to achieve a standard straight out of the blocks, because they might need a little bit more support. But overall, so long as the team and the department were doing it, that would be all right. But you would expect to be able to coach and to develop that person so that they could reach that standard. And then again, that should be happening each and every time. And let's take a look at this final one. So reducing time lost due to accidents by the year end. So objective is the, am I right? Yes, objective is the front runner there. But in actual fact here, I believe it is none of the above. Or I can sometimes be very playful and say, do you know what? I think this statement is trying desperately hard to be an objective, but it's failing. And it's failing for the sorts of reasons that I think it was you, Ode, you picked up on that one. You said that it wasn't crisp enough. It wasn't going to be measurable enough. Maybe so you could say, well, have the accidents been reduced by the end of the year? Yes, you could say so. However, just imagine this. Manager and staff member agree that objective at the start of the year, but it's not specific beyond what you see on the screen right now. I'm that staff member. I manage by some measures to at least achieve that we have fewer accidents by the end of the year. And I'm now going for my end of year performance review. And I'm going into that meeting in an entirely relaxed fashion, thinking I've reduced it, so I'm going to be fine in this meeting. The manager is coming storming in because they're thinking, well, the figures came down a bit, but not that much. Well, guess what? You weren't specific. We didn't unpack it enough. Therefore, I'm now going to stop sharing those results right now. If I do that and minimize it, have I come back to the main screen of setting the objectives or not? Yeah, I have, right? That's great. Thank you all very much. So if I now take us on, here is our glossary of terms. I hope by my descriptions now against those, you can see what I'm effectively writing those sorts of things to in terms of this glossary. And I know that that glossary was available to you in your workbooks as well. The two at the bottom, I've mentioned there that objectives for a new starter might accept a different level of performance than the predetermined level of a standard while that person is trained and developed. It might mean that others have to go the extra mile meanwhile to make sure that overall it is achieved. So let's just put a little toe in the water around SMART objectives, with which from our conversations I can see that you're having, you've got some familiarity. If you actually got your objectives out right now that you are working to, do they really, in all honesty though, look a little bit like this? They're passive, maybe a little bit unrealistic, indeterminable. Are they measurable? Are they open-ended? Are they imprecise? Or are they this whole set of words that go with it? Reasonable, rational, specific, measurable, pragmatic, practical, trackable, realistic, a whole set there. I hope that we try to write our objectives more like this, as SMART objectives. However, maybe that's too many words for us to kind of write them to. Therefore, you might want to think about reducing that number. And SMART is the typical acronym. If you use SMART in your organizations, what do you use each of those letters for? Here I've got representations of being specific, being measurable, being agreed, and I'll come back to the A in a moment, being realistic, and being timed. I think they are a good selection out of the ones in the middle. Let me return to the A. And the A, we've got there as agreed. So it's the thumbs up sign between two parties. Both parties can agree to it, which is great. The other A, which is my absolute all-time favorite A, is action-based. Because as soon as we start thinking about writing as an objective that's action-based, it forces us to write a verb that we are much more likely to be able to see, identify, recognize, action it. It's got that sense about it, rather than the imprecise nature of them sometimes. So think about that. I also would suggest that it's very easy for us to learn an acronym. To write really precise SMART objectives is tough. And I defy any manager with their staff member to write a perfectly SMART objective in one go. Be fair to yourselves, be realistic with yourselves. What I would encourage you to do at that stage where you're having the discussion after a business plan, and then you're about to go into looking at an individual's capability and then capturing their objectives. I would encourage both of you to think about the direction of that objective, and then each of you to have a go separately at writing it, then come back together and then test it against the acronym SMART. And even 3 months, 4 months, 5 months down the line, I bet you would still be able to improve it and make it more smart. So always have that healthy disdain about the thing you first write down together, and be prepared to come back and make it more crisp. Look, I put here as well, I've added the ER in at the end of this, so let me reference that, along with the fact that here I've got the action-based bit, which is my favourite, as you now know. And the ER at the end, to make it smarter, is a nice reminder that we should evaluate our objectives through the year, and that's also the R part, the reviewing them regularly. And then we've got that added bit about making them environmentally appropriate, and that might be towards the green agenda if that is relevant, but it may be to the wider organisational environment context. Some guidelines you might like to think about making your objectives relate to the aims of the organisation. That's the reason you share with people about the general direction of the business plan, to the team's departments and the individual's level of experience. I do encourage you to limit the number of and prioritise the objectives. So how many is too many? That's still quite a difficult question for me to answer. 10, I'm sure, is too many. I think I'd rather go for 3 or 4, even if they are broken down then into sub-activities. And certainly if you're looking more at the 5 or 6 major ones over the cycle of a year, having the discussion of, and if our if the organisation comes under some kind of pressure or stress, which of these has to be done at all costs? So you actually have that prioritisation discussion, as well as putting them into some rough timelines in the year by which they will be completed, or you will have those reviews against them. Vary the focus, think about putting in some routine work, which actually links it back to the job description very nicely. So yeah, build something around that. It may be that you and your team are facing some projects that have got some problem solving elements. This is a great opportunity to fashion, to craft an objective around an upcoming project. So make it more of a problem solving one, as well as the personal development aims of the individual. So really mix them up to give them that depth around them. I think I've kind of almost implied this here around targeting them. Longer term are anything from 3 months and beyond. And it is okay then to have those quarterly objectives or those sub-activities that feed into those longer term objectives of 3 months and beyond. So shorter term standalone that feed into the long term. So do think about that, see if that assists you in some way. Let me just find my way through my next slides, give myself a reminder. Ah, yes, I know what I wanted to look at next. Right, okay. This is truly all well and good. There is absolutely nothing wrong with using a guide such as SMART and Smarter to help us be crisp about capturing the objectives. But there's something a bit troublesome for me as well about them. It can mean that people are so focused on things that are countable, it's almost as if it's the antithesis of where we started today with building trust and rapport. You know, if you're kind of watching my every move as a staff member, I tighten up, I get more tense, because that's what I'm focused on, instead of being more relaxed, looking at my relationship with beneficiaries, looking at my relationship with team members, looking at how I can help the organisation achieve its longer term goals. And so a language that for me fits very well into the voluntary, not-for-profit, non-governmental sort of sector is to think about outcomes. And I do a lot of work with voluntary organisations around project management. And whenever I am training in that field, I always talk about the project management focus definition for outcomes. And for me, it's about the changed circumstances or behaviours that results from the use of in fact, it's a combination of an input and then an output. It's a bit jargony, I know that. I can critique that myself, of course. But for me, an outcome is really the likely or achieved short-term and medium-term effects of an intervention's outputs. It's the difference it will make to the beneficiaries. And so actually, if you prefer, and if it fits in with your organisational culture and your organisational language, to think more in that piece, in that bottom right-hand corner, when I built the cycle, the performance cycle, the bottom right had the SMART objectives reference in it. But if actually it would fit your organisation to think about outcomes, I'm entirely happy with that, because it's about saying with your staff members, so at the end of the year, what do you want to have achieved? What differences do you want to have made that we can now see feedback in to the organisation's overall direction, or excuse me, in relation to your work with a particular internal or external beneficiary. So I think of it as the difference that you make with them. The other reason that that could be powerful is SMART objectives might once have been okay, quite well placed when we were all working in offices, when we were in quite literal close proximity of each other, where we could see each other's inputs and outputs readily. Actually, we can't see each other's inputs and outputs very readily when we are working remotely and at a distance. And some of your organisations were already doing that because the nature of what you do, you work remotely. But even more so now in this pandemic, the effects of which, you know, continue to be protracted. We need to have increased trust in, build greater rapport with our staff members so that we do agree with them what they need to have achieved. But actually the way in which they get there is up to them. Do you remember that came out in discussion yesterday? Living with the fact that people might get to an end point differently from the way that you would get to it. But if that's not critical, then that's great. That's great. So see if that flips and works well for you. And I'd be very happy to pick up with this as a further discussion in Curator. You might want to bring, as I said earlier, some of your objectives or those with your staff members, see if they are SMART and or if we can work them through in terms of outcomes instead. So thank you all for that so far. I'm going to move us on fairly at that speed. You know, I have to work in a fairly speedy fashion. Delegation. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. We've all known that for a long time. There were perhaps a few light bulb moments for people earlier from my observations in Curator conversation around the work we did about good practice in time management and prioritising. So some of you have realised that you're just going to have to let a few things go that really were never that important or urgent, but you're carrying them around like a ball and chain, right? So let them go. And actually, we need to let things go in order to focus on the things that we as managers need to deliver ourselves, and also to see delegation as a great opportunity to develop other people, our own staff members, our own individuals' skills and competence. Again, they might not do it the way you would, but that is absolutely fine. And then overall, together as a team, you may well achieve more. It's that synergy piece that comes about. So delegation, what is it? Would you agree? Throw your comments in the chat while I'm going through this. It's a means of achieving results. It's a means of motivating and empowering. I think I've just referenced that. It's a way of contributing to personal development. Look at this next one. Guess what? You could give the task to someone who could do it better than you. And actually, if you observed that, I don't mean by breathing down their neck, I mean at a respectful distance. I mean asking them about, that's an interesting way out, you're doing that, I would never have thought about that, tell me more, I want to learn. You might just learn from somebody else who is junior to you. Give someone else the responsibility and authority to act on your behalf, but the ultimate accountability remains with you. So if there's someone who, whilst doing the task slightly differently, can still achieve it, then go ahead and delegate. Now look at this next one. If there's someone who's paid less than you who can do the job satisfactorily, delegate it. That is absolutely fine. It is a perfectly reasonable thing on which to make that assessment. However, it comes with a big however. You can hear me, you can see me emphasizing the however. Don't make that your standard by which you delegate everything, because if you do, people will very quickly learn to distrust you. Remember from the Peter Scholtes model, they will soon distrust you because that's the only thing you ever give them. You have to delegate things to people where they feel that, hopefully this camera will capture me, if they reached out, as I'm doing now with my hand, if they reached out, the thing that you are delegating still at the moment lies slightly beyond their reach, because most of us respond well to a bit of stretch in life. So remember to make that your principal standard. It is okay also if you can't do the task until tomorrow, but there's someone who can do it today. Yes, again, watch that. Don't always do it that way. Someone would get some development from it and you could learn. Then if any of those apply with my slight qualifications on them, then delegate. I think at this stage I've got a task for people, Lucy, haven't I?
Yeah, sure.
So you're about to go into small groups. I know that Lucy's going to throw into the chat the challenge, which I instantaneously have lost from my own eye line, but I know it will appear. There we go. Here it comes. Thank you very much, Lucy. In your subgroups, you've got 5 minutes from the slides that I've talked through your experience of delegating to generate your top 5 tips for delegating in practice. How do you do it?
Okay, let me release you. Yeah.
Lovely. Yes, please, Lucy. Yeah, we're everyone back. Lovely. Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Lucy. Okay, so the way I'd like to handle this feedback is by actually taking us straight to the next slide. Meanwhile, if you have your top 5 things that you can copy into the chat, what I'm going to do is to say your chance here is to compare what you have with my do's and don'ts list. And then when I go round the rooms, just pull out particularly things where you say, oh, that was a strong point, we agreed with that. But also, Andrea, you've forgotten X. So pull out things that I've not mentioned, okay? So if you want to start copying your top 5 over into the chat box, if you are able to from the groups, that would be great. And I'm going straight to that next slide. So here's my delegation do's and don'ts. It's not presented as a top 5, but let's look to see what you've got in your top 5 that in some way is reflected here. Oh, lovely stuff. Fabulous. Okay, so I can see a couple of groups have put them in for me. Thank you. So what I'll do is quickly go around each room now and do declare, because I might not always quickly pick this up, do declare if you've popped something in the chat or not. Whether you have or not, your job is to say, we said that's on there, Andrea, but you've missed such and such a point. So room 1, yeah, and in fact, Daniela, I can see that the room you were in, you've just popped a few things up there now. So would you or one of your colleagues from that room like to pull out and compare with my list here?
Sure.
Thank you, Daniela.
So we had a very interesting discussion regarding also the first staff development. So we liked your suggestion of looking at how the person could stretch a little bit further, and so that was one point. Then I think we discuss also like to be very specific and having a clear communication of our expectation. So I don't really see. Yeah, and the other one was related to sometime not only specific task, but like responsibility and decision making can also be delegated as well.
Very good.
With the task. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Daniela. Yeah, that's super. You just sparked off in me another thought, actually. Yes, a little tip is when you're doing that delegation piece, to conclude it, it can be quite useful to say to the person, would you like to just summarize back to me what I think the ask is of you? Because if you do that, think about everything we did yesterday in terms of communication, you know, our distortion factors, all of that we were looking at. If you check it back, you've got this chance to know that you're both in the same space together. So use that as a little technique. That came out of what you said. Thank you for that. You sparked me there. The second room, Bridget, Tara and Zach. What would you like to pull out of this in comparison with what I've got here on this screen?
This is Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, I think one thing that we added that's maybe suggested here, implied but not explicit, is not to wait until the last minute when you realize you don't have time to do something to delegate. Yes. To make sure that you've given people a good amount of time so that they can do it well.
Absolutely. I mean, the number, yes, I smiled and laughed, didn't I? Because, you know, if I think back through my career, the number of times that somebody's landed it on me in the last moment and expected me to pull a rabbit out of a hat, you know, oh, for goodness sake. Yeah. And it makes me also think about the time management piece, where we've got delegate in the bottom right box. And I also said, be cautious about that. You don't only delegate things that are of low importance, you delegate high importance things as well. And do you remember I put a time by that, at least 20% of time. You need to take time to communicate with people what you want and give them time to do it. Perfect catch, Tara. You found me out. Wonderful.
With the team.
Well, great. I'm entirely up for that being called. Room 3, Heba, Jerry, and Terry. Where's your comparison with this?
Okay, so, then the things that we reached out about are the trust from the manager to the employee, then accountability of performance. The employee should be held accountable for the tasks that he's doing, or else the manager will be in big trouble. Yeah. And the feedback after the task completed. Then delegating the activity, it will help the employee grow and develop.
Super, super. And you've just reminded me of a phrase I think I catch myself using sometimes. I think it's right, it feels right. When I've delegated something to an individual, a phrase like, I know you're going to do a good job in this. You know, lift them and remember my door is always open. You know, if something occurs en route and my door is open, that would fit well with how to do this in really practical, simple terms. Thank you for that. And now if I look at room 4, Gibson, Pam and Shannon.
Hi, Hi, it's Pam. We had a pretty good discussion, and Shannon started by talking about how she has a very strong team and she knows their skill sets very well, and she has a great amount of trust in the team. So she will delegate based on skill sets and also invite them to present or share the information so that their talents are also showcased to others.
Oh, nice.
Which is a really, really admirable thing. And so we discussed that a bit. One of the things I mentioned is sharing the bigger picture and sort of the goal of the assignment or the project that you're giving to someone, so that they understand the audience and the scope and have good specifics about the deliverables so they hit the mark. So that just really encompasses, part of giving good instructions. And Gibson had a really great point about identifying how this can be an opportunity for growth to those that you delegate an opportunity to. It's not just an assignment, it can be an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful comments, fantastic, Lauren. I love that notion of, and it isn't up there, it's another great get. It doesn't mention up here giving people the context of the task or the activity, and that just so helps people understand what they're doing and why they're being asked to do it. So that's fabulous. Thank you all so much for doing that. Great stuff. So what I hope through this session at this stage of the day, you can see I'm trying to build on what we did yesterday in terms of our skills as managers, but then the kind of a cycle through which we use these things in practical ways. And so the next one I want to look at, and it might well be the final one for now, is that notion of supervision and one-to-ones. Oh, do you know, I never know what to call this piece, because so many organizations refer to this differently. It's the one-to-one meeting, it's the regular get-togethers, it's the stand-up meetings. Some people might see it as formal supervision. I don't much care what you call it, but it is that regularity of meeting which is peppered and punctuated throughout the whole cycle. Now, it could be that your own organizations, in your guidelines for managers, if you have those kind of documents to hand, you've already got an agenda, a template, a format, a formula, all of those words for that supervision session. If you have, great. If you've got it to hand right now, great, lovely, you can look at it, I don't mind. But if you haven't, this would be a great opportunity now in groups to create a generic agenda that you could kind of pull off the shelf and discuss and use it as your agenda. It's what it says, an agenda for every meeting you have in a one-to-one. Let me just kind of give you that feel for how I define this stuff. Being a line manager is a significant responsibility. It needs to be taken seriously, otherwise why are we all here now? Your organization and the individuals you supervise expect you to provide some kind of supervision one-to-one that is scheduled. It's in the diary, it's in the schedule, it's well in advance, and I would underline it should only be changed in exceptional circumstances. So I would actually, because our diaries get clogged up, so actually, if you are going to meet on a monthly, weekly basis, whatever basis you agree with your individuals, I'd actually put those in the schedule and only change them under exceptional circumstances. They should be well planned and structured, which is what I'm about to ask you to do now in terms of creating that agenda. And both you and the individuals should contribute to it. So actually, even once you've got your takeaway for today in an agenda that you create, you might want to take that back to your team and say, would this be useful that we both use when we come together? And they may well want to add to that. It should, of course, be conducted in an appropriate setting and be free from interruptions. It should be properly and promptly recorded. By that, I mean some notes. Now, in some organizations, the expectation is that the manager writes up the notes from that meeting. I'm shrugging my shoulders. I hope you can see I actually don't care who writes up the notes, so long as one of you does. And the reason I don't care is where it's the manager, you're going to be sharing them back with the individual, because that's what they ought to be focusing on for their in the meantime before they meet you again. And if it's the staff member, then they should be sharing that back with you anyway, so that you both know that becomes part of the agenda next time around. So I really don't think it matters. I have had some people say to me that it's a cop-out if the managers give the responsibility for that to staff members. I don't think I wholly agree, because I think it's about giving people responsibility for themselves. And I think that goes back to that growth thing that we can do with our own staff members. Just checking. Oh, Shannon, you've said it to everyone. I don't know if people are seeing it. Yeah. Yeah, so let others capture it. Yeah, I can do action points. Yeah, need training on note taking. Oh, lovely. Thank you for that confirmation, as I'm now sharing it with the world. Thank you for that. Yeah. However, I'm going to throw it back the other way. If you know you're not good at note taking, maybe you should take over for a while and give yourself that stretch. There you go. There's always a counter argument, isn't there? Fantastic. Okay, so the purpose overall supervision, so I can then let you go away and devise an agenda. These might be some good tips there for thinking about how you're going to factor them in. It's about ensuring that staff members are clear about their roles and responsibilities. People's best interests are promoted. In fact, it's kind of this, people need attention. We all need attention to varying degrees. We're not all wired the same way, of course. Every one of your staff members needs your attention, your full and undivided attention. And that's that second bit about ensuring their best interests are promoted. It's about therefore feeding into organisation objectives. It's about ensuring people have manageable and appropriate workload. So where does this fit into your agenda? It's about creating that supportive climate for practice and performance. It's that mutual trust thing, people's development, supporting individuals in managing the demands, task and emotional, promoting clear communication. So that's your header. Here's your task based on those few slides and your understanding of your organization's expectations of one-to-one. In 5 minutes in your groups, please create a template agenda for a one-to-one session, and you may share that in the chat when we come back. Would you like to send people away, Lucy?
No.
Fantastic. Everyone's back in?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's go around the rooms again. I don't feel that I have to take them in any way in a linear fashion. Would one person like to come in and share your agenda items, please? You can throw them in chat if you've done them in that way, and that's convenient for you, and talk us through them. Where am I looking? I'm looking for a hand up or simply a straight unmute and come in.
I can volunteer. I can break the silence.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
Definitely. So in our group, we discussed starting with kind of a check-in of how are you, personally and professionally, just seeing where folks are at, and kind of what their energy is during the week.
Lovely.
And then kind of the framing of like, okay, what are our priorities? What's working well? What's not working? What's kind of blocking us, and talking through that. And then we talked about kind of soliciting feedback at the end.
Yep.
And yeah.
Super. I love your reference as to how you open that up by checking in with people's energy. I think that's really valuable insight. Yeah, using that word energy. Thank you for that. Super. Where do I look next?
I can come in for our group.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, so one thing that came up is that how to structure the agenda and what points to put on it will necessarily vary based on how regular the meetings are. So there needs to be a bit of flexibility in how we approach this.
Fine.
Otherwise, it was suggested that sort of kick off with the "How are you" part, as one of our team members put it, a personal check-in, and making sure everyone, everyone's getting the support they need personally and is fulfilled in the role. Make sure that basically the basics of the meeting itself are agreed: the date and time, the purpose, who's involved, what are the agenda points, what the purpose of the meeting is, why we're talking with each other over and over again. And then the discussion of some of the substantive work areas focused on specifically where things are off track and what kind of support is needed, or what assumptions are proving false.
Lovely. Yeah. I make a few notes from the common things that are being said here. Super, thank you. Should I move on to someone else, or are there other things that you wanted to bring in? I just couldn't decide. I couldn't decide if there was something more or not. Super, let me see, where do I look next? The next room of the 4 rooms.
I can go for
Thank you, Shannon.
For Holly, Tarek, and I. We're in a room together.
Thank you, got you, yeah.
So some of what's already been said, we discussed, opening it up with how are you, having the person you're meeting with kind of go through their updates, where they may need support, but then also saying, okay, and here are the 1 or 2 things that I would need you to follow up on in the next day or 2, and then say, please don't quit because I need you, and don't leave. We're talking about an intern, like if you have an intern, like you want to keep that person happy. We also talked about an agenda. I guess I was talking about a lot of times when I meet with my direct reports, they do the agenda. And so they come prepared with an agenda.
Very nice.
And then I will add a couple of things, other things we need to discuss. And then it was interesting because we were talking about, if you always let your direct report set the agenda, they may be setting it so there are certain things they potentially don't want to talk about. So you need to ensure if there's critical things that need to be discussed, that you put those on the agenda as well, if you're letting them kind of set the agenda.
Letting them lead, and given everything else I've said, that notion of building trust, it's a great technique to let them lead on it. But I think it then goes also back to Scott's point about having established what the purpose of the meeting is, and that therefore it's two-way. So I think those 2 things fit together very well. I loved your reference to "please don't go, I need you." Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
That was me.
That's so, Holly, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But now look, everybody in the room, whatever you do, don't beg. Or begging is ugly. Yeah, don't go begging. However, I'm being very playful and very wicked about this right now, I know. But actually, if you are really practicing from your heart, and from your heart and your intellect, all of the sorts of things we've been looking at in this journey so far, you won't need to beg people to stay, because they will feel respected. They will feel that they can contribute. They will feel part of it. But that's so lovely. You've made me smile this afternoon. That's absolutely great. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you. I think I've got a 4th room I need to turn to briefly, have I? Just help me if I've missed a room out. If there's any, or I'm very happy just simply to throw it open. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
I think our group was the last remaining one, and honestly, the things that we put together have pretty much been covered already.
That's lovely, and that's fine. We don't need to overemphasize it. That's great. Thank you all very much indeed for that. That's super. I'm loving what you're saying. I think you've got to check in with the energy. and you need to do a progress work update. And I love the implied bit. It was implied, but I mean, I'd actually say, I would use a phrase about, are you encountering any barriers? Or is anything getting in your way? Because that can open that up, because there may be some barriers you need to be instrumental in influencing and removing. But also, you know, we do have staff members who put barriers in their own way. And that was kind of partly, I think, referred to by you, Shannon. You know, if somebody's actually creating the agenda and there might be some things they don't want to talk about, you've got to somehow get to the barriers that come from within them as well. So that's important. This is also an opportunity to get people talking if there are any inter-team work issues. So, you know, it's your chance one-to-one. Is everything all right in the team? Are you getting on with anybody? Are there any issues there I need to be aware of? So that's a good one to somehow weave in. Yeah, and right, I think those are the only couple of other things that I would add in. That then allows me to just finish very briefly with a final area, because I'm time aware, and it is this question. Aside from these sessions with me, what was the last piece of learning and development you had through your organisation? Just throw your ideas into the chat box. What was the last piece of learning and development you had aside from this programme? Pam has a hand up. Thank you. I'm missing somebody. Thank you, Pam. Have I missed you out earlier?
Yes, I know we're running out of time. We could catch it later, Andrea, but I wanted to just ask for any other suggestions related to the one-on-ones. One thing I've noticed that employees are often nervous about them, regardless of the reason for the meeting. And those softball openings at the top are so important to setting a good tone, to make them comfortable and realize that this is intended to be a productive meeting and a safe space, so to speak. That just came up for us recently. And so any other thoughts on how to really open these up, like the comment about the energy and how to help employees feel comfortable right up the top,
Right.
set a good tone?
Right, I have, and actually, I think that's such a pertinent question. I am going to ask you all if I can take 2 minutes to give you a response, because I think I've got something that can really help. And it is, whilst yes, you as managers are responsible for setting that good tone, why don't you all have at a next team meeting an agenda item which is about the notion of one-on-ones with people? And so you ask the question for people, what do you want out of your one-on-ones with me? And you get them, you step out of the room, you get them to almost create the agenda. Then you come back in, you get them to share with you that, and then you say, and I've probably got a few things I want out of that as well. So it now becomes a much more shared platform. And actually what you've created is this team agreement that that's the shape and format of the one-on-ones going forward. And I bet then when you start that next round, the flavour, the atmosphere will be better. I think I saw a hands up clap. I think it was to my idea there. I don't know. Just see if that would work. And I'll very happily talk through more on Curator, because I'll say I'm going in there. So I'm really happy to have those discussions as well with you. Okay, I'm now very aware that it is just after the half hour. You no doubt all have so many other things that you need to be going and doing, meetings to go to, places to be. So I've stopped sharing. I'll worry about picking up with that with you later today, and we can easily do so out of Curator. Thank you all so much. I hope that was a useful session on managing the individual, working with people. See you later. We'll go on to Teams. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Thank you.